Welcome back to the 1955 Studebaker. Today we're working actually on the engine and getting this thing ready to go back in. First thing we need to do, as we discovered last time, our fancy thingamajig here, the exhaust manifold, is shattered. So we need to see if we can possibly get it off without breaking any of these bolts. I don't think I've ever taken one of these off without breaking bolts, so I guess hopefully this will be a first. But I doubt it. I would have never believed it. I just heated this up with a torch, and it literally twisted. I did not have to put any pressure on that. Okay, what the hell? We are 5 for 5, one last one to go, and that's definitely gonna be the one that breaks, because I know my luck. But let's see if we can get it off. Now, I'm pretty certain somebody that can give the proper temperature and use the proper rod could weld or braze or whatever this exhaust manifold back together, because it is complete. However, this butterfly valve, or whatever somebody called this valve, I might be misremembering that, it's going to have to be replaced. One, because it's seized, and two, it's missing a giant chunk right there. I gambled, and it paid off. The other side came off, again, with absolutely no issues. I even only torched one of these before I decided to, why don't I just put a little bit of pressure and see if they come out, and the other 5 just came right out with basically no pressure. Now, everyone keeps saying just re-gasket everything, replace all the gaskets. Here's the thing. This thing is not very popular, to say the least. I'm sure they used to be. But getting parts for these things is getting harder and harder and harder to find. There's like 2 places that sell you gasket kits for this stuff. And trust me, they know they're the only 2. To be fair, I know small order manufacturing is a lot more expensive than your just manufacturing for a bunch of orders. They probably only sell a few of these a year. So that's why it costs a lot more. The issue is with that, it costs me a lot more to do what it would cost a whole lot less to do on any other older car that's a little bit more relevant today. These gaskets are basically twice the price because nobody buys them. And one of those things where, honestly, this is held in by, like, not that many bolts. These are extremely easy to pull out. I, with a little bit of help from my brother and my dad, pulled this thing out in a day, basically. So, actually, no, not even basically, a day. So, it's not like it's a big deal if something in the future starts leaking to pull it back out and do it again if it's something that is majorly leaking. The main thing that's going to screw me on this transmission is this shaft linkage seal leaks. If I wheel this back and forth, a whole bunch of oil starts coming out. So I think one of our major leaks is that. So that is going to be real fun to replace. I got 6 flex plate bolts out. I'm not sure if that's all of them. I'm pretty sure it is. And now I'm working on taking off the bell housing bolts here, and then I think we should be able to just pull this off of this. Let's hope. Some of the Studebaker parts were wrapped up in newspaper in the trunk. This one here is from 1972. It is the Washington Post. What I found cool is, one, you could buy a Levi's Gremlin, but you can actually be a COBOL programmer for government research or government computer center. Funnily enough, that programmer might still have some COBOL still in use because, well, we still use that. I actually have some good news. 1, it looks pretty clean in here, and 2, there's, well, it actually does look pretty clean in here. There's, like, basically not a whole bunch of sludge in here. That looks very good. A little bit of dirt in here, but some of that probably fell in. This screen looks absolutely fantastic, so I don't think we're going to have any issues with this transmission. We just got to re-gasket it, which it actually looks like that shift linkage gasket won't be as difficult as I thought. We should be able to just unbolt that, pull that out, and put in new seals there. Awesome. I managed to get the shift shaft seal out. It came out in more than one piece, so we're definitely going to have to replace that, but it was literally dripping, so we're going to have to replace that anyway, which is why I pulled it out. Luckily, I did find that for sale relatively cheap. Rock Auto has it for $5, but they don't have the oil pan gasket, so I'll have to go through a Studebaker place to get that, which means I'll probably just get all my parts through them so I can combine all my shipping. I've cleaned up the bell housing pretty good now, so what I'm going to do now is take some tape and tape off the things that I don't want painted, like the mating surfaces and stuff like that. That's pretty much it. And then we're going to paint this thing with some 600-degree primer. We'll get it painted the actual color once I get that in, but I got some primer to keep this thing from rusting and to get it nice and clean looking. If you want to easily cut stuff on a metal surface when you're taping it off like this and it's on a raised part, you can take a plastic hammer and just tap it along the edge, and it cuts the tape perfectly out. We're going to start stripping off a few of the parts that we want to actually powder coat on this engine, specifically this fan, this pulley. We'll get those sandblasted and get those powder coated. I'm not taking off that because I'm not taking out the crank bolt and all that, so that's going to get just normal spray painted, but we can get this stuff powder coated. Oh, you got to see what else I need to powder coat. Obviously, the valve covers I want to get powder coated, but we'll see what all comes off. And And there we go. I sandblasted the fan and the pulley. Weirdly, they're very similar color to my primer that I put on those transmission parts previously. But now that these are sandblasted, we'll get those powder coated, thinking probably just a basic black. I've got everything taped up for the most part that I care about-ish. The wires, spark plugs, they're all going to be replaced, so I don't care. Valve covers are going to get sandblasted and powder coated, so I don't care. And, well, I don't want to have to cover up the valves, so I might as well just leave those on and let them get painted. I covered that up, though. Honestly, I'll probably sandblast that oil filter down and paint it or powder coat it orange. But for the rest of this, I got all the holes plugged up, so let's get this thing painted. Almost forgot to cut the tape off the distributor logo. Now, for the paint for the engine, I couldn't find Studebaker blue, but it was a mix-up between Pontiac blue and AMC blue, and I went with AMC blue because Seymour Paint had it, and I wanted to give Seymour Paint a try. I haven't used it before, but I've heard good things, so I got their engine stuff, so let's get painting. That's looking absolutely incredible. Now imagine that with chrome valve covers, the orange oil canister. Absolutely fantastic looking. Now we need to finish the Studebaker motor. As you can see, it looks pretty good, but we need to actually do the accessories that'll actually make this all look good and not look like a giant blue Smurf. So, what we need to do first is figure out what we need to pull off to get painted a different color. Obviously, valve covers are going to get sandblasted. We need to figure out if we can remove that without making the world's biggest mess. And then a few other things that need, well, sandblasted and painted or powder coated, the fan and stuff for this, so let's get on that. The valve cover setup here, we're going to try powder coating this with the chrome powder coat. We'll see how this works, if I have to sandblast it back down. Let's give this a try. I think it should fit in my oven just barely. Looks insane. Now it's going to have to get clear powder coated then after this, which will dull it down a little bit, but that looks so incredibly good. It'll look terrible when it's covered in oil, but you know, for now, that looks insane. And once we have both those on that engine, I think that's gonna pop incredibly well. Well, something I forgot to mention when I did that one is I'm taping off the inside because from what I've read, you don't want to get paint or powder coat on the inside because then it could flake off and then get into the engine. The oil will keep this from rusting on the inside just fine, so you just need to do the outside. That's why I'm taping these off. And there's the second valve cover, the oil canister cap, I guess the oil fill cap, I guess it's called, is now in the oven with the clear coat on it, so we'll see how that turns out. And that takes 18 minutes, while this was only 10 minutes, so I guess it's gonna melt through and embed into that stuff. It'll be a little duller, but it should make it a lot more durable. And here's our oil fill cap. I dulled it down a little bit. It's not quite as vibrant, but it's definitely still absolutely phenomenal looking. I think I burned it a little bit, so I don't think it's as good as it could be. It's supposed to be done at 375. I cranked the knob the wrong way and went up to 425, so I think we burn it just a little bit, but hopefully the valve cover comes out a little bit better. There we go, valve covers are done. Obviously they aren't as good as if I was to get them professionally chromed, but again, we're doing this car on a budget. I don't want to spend a few $100 on chrome valve covers when I can just powder coat them for a tenth of the price, basically. So, those look absolutely fantastic. Now let's, well, powder coat some black things. And there we go. We have a bunch of the stuff now powder coated, and this dipstick, the actual dipstick part of it's not powder coated. That's just tape I need to peel off. Should have peeled it off before it went in the oven, because now that's very stuck on there. But you got everything from these acorn nuts powder coated. So they're going to look absolutely amazing against those chrome valve covers. Got the front pulley and fan, all sorts of different stuff that gets mounted on top of these, the wire holders, the coil holder. That is looking absolutely fantastic. And now the actual oil filter housing is in the powder coating with powder coating it orange. There we go. Now some of this stuff's obviously just sitting on here. I didn't actually fully mount it yet. I need to wash that out and get all the dirt that I put in that oil canister out before I remount that, but that looks absolutely fantastic. Now, a few people criticized on the short I posted about painting this engine block that, well, I just basically spray bombed the thing, but honestly, with the other accessories painted different colors, I kind of like it. Had I painted like this a separate color, the head's a different color from the block and all that, it would have just looked like a mess of random colors. This definitely looks good, and there'll be a little bit more black that ties in the rest of this stuff, so this definitely looks really nice in my opinion. Now, one person also said I should have sanded the block down, make it smooth, which I can't imagine they were serious. I got the oil filter stuff hooked back on. That looks absolutely incredible. Now I have new stickers coming in to replace the original stickers that got sandblasted off what was left of them. So we'll have the original stickers for that. I also have Bearcat decals coming for these valve covers. That'll look absolutely fantastic there. Again, I'm very happy with how this motor is looking. It was looking very blue smurfy, but it's definitely coming together. Now what we're going to do is I need to get under this car, and while I could put it on the little ramps that I have, it only raises it up like 6 inches. I need to raise this up a lot higher if I want to get under there, properly rust coat the underside and all that fun stuff. So we're going to build a DIY car lift, kind of. Basically, this is what we're going with. 19 by 16 cribbage like this that we can just set the tire on in here, and then that'll raise it up, and this should hold the tire pretty nice and stable. One car lift. I just need to buy an actual car lift so I can lift it up high enough to put these on it. That'll be fun, but hopefully this will work. There we go. We are now on. Now, I'm not going to go into the sketchiness. I did lift the rear end up, but the front end was easy. It is now up, and I must say, it is very, very stable. Like, this thing is not going to just fall off at all. Those things are more stable than what it would be on normal jack stands, so I'm pretty happy with this solution, I think. A little bit difficult to get it on, and I'm sure it'll be just as difficult to get it off, but, well, I think it'll work pretty damn well. I have quite the height now to actually go under this thing and work underneath it. Now that we have the Studebaker up on stilts, I'm going to start by rust coating the underside of this front frame area here. As you can see, I never did that. I put some of the rust converter stuff in this spray bottle here so I can hopefully just spray it on. That actually worked really well. So let's see what we can do and get all this rust converted. What I've been doing is taking a propane torch, heating up the undercoating, and then scraping it off with a paint scraper. It's worked fairly well. I've gotten a lot off. Gotten all of these cleaned up, above the gas tank cleaned up. I need to do above the axle there, and then I need to do on the outside of the frame rails, and I need to do up front where the front seats are. So I guess I'll continue doing that. It's something that I'm glad it's somewhat cool out today because, one, I'm working with fire, so it's nice and warm, and I have to wear a paint suit because I don't want covered in all this goop, and also a respirator and all that fun stuff. So let's continue. I got a ton of this weird putty off the underside of the vehicle here. I'm glad I did. There was some surface rust under it, so that could have turned out to be a lot worse rust later on down the road. So what we now need to do is take a wire wheel and wire wheel everything. Now you may be wondering why I don't sandblast the entire underside and just do it that way. That would be the correct way to do it. The issue is with sandblasting is sand gets in everything. I'd have to 100% disassemble this thing, take the body off the frame, sandblast the body, obviously have your axles and differentials, all that taken off so you don't get sand in them. The issue with that is I don't want to turn this into a 20-year restoration project. I'd like to have this done fairly quickly. I don't want to be one of those people that spends 20 years restoring a car to perfect factory specs and spend 5 times what the car is worth. And that also rules out dry ice blasting. I could get the thing dry ice blasted, that gets rid of the problem of dust, but that costs a few grand, and you can buy a fairly good one of these for a few grand. I don't want to be that much underwater in this thing. Obviously, if this was like a $100,000 super rare car, you'd absolutely do that, but you can buy a really nice one of these for 20 grand.
Got pretty much all the surface rust wire wheeled, so we should be able to rust convert that. Now, unfortunately, I still need to hit everything with a grindstone, all the old welds and stuff that I did. And I found a few pinholes I have to fill, mostly nail holes specifically from that weird carpet install with nails. But it has been fully wire wheeled front to back. I am really tired. This looks like a dirt floor. This was swept out multiple times during this process. Okay, so I am suited up to roll under this thing and start POR-15 absolutely everything. I got a full paint suit on, I got gloves, I got a mask and a respirator. My face is fully sealed in because I don't really want POR-15 in my eyes. So, let's get started.
And there we go. Under the trunk here is looking so good. Now, I ran out. I only had about a quarter of a can left, and I ran out of that quarter of a can. It only made it to just over the rear axle, so have to get another can, and hopefully that'll be enough to do the rest of the vehicle. But I am very glad I wore an entire bodysuit for this because it made such a mess. And there we go. Basically 2 cans of POR-15 later. The entire underside is now POR-15'd on this thing. Yeah. It's not so fun to do upside down, but the entire side should hopefully not have any more rust problems for a very long time. Now we're going to pivot over to the engine again, and we're going to be putting in some gaskets that finally came in from my Studebaker parts order. We have some valve cover gaskets. They're rubber because, well, they're like a couple dollars more than cork, and I figured I'd give the rubber ones a try because the cork ones, once you compress them, you really can't take them off and reuse them. The rubber ones, you should at least have once or twice that you could technically probably reuse them as long as they're not fully crushed, but we'll give those a try. And obviously it's just, you know, the rubber gaskets, and it also has the little pieces that go in there. So we'll finally be able to mount our fancy powder-coated valve covers. I also got a bunch of stickers for it. I got the new valve cover Bearcat stickers. I got some oil filter housing stickers, an air filter sticker, all that fun stuff. The issue is we're not going to install those until the engine is back in the car, because I know for a fact if I put them on right now, we're going to scratch the finish on one of said items, where I'm going to have to sandblast it down, and then I'd have to buy the sticker again. So we're just going to wait until we have this back in the car. And there we go. Our valve covers are mounted on. I think I have these things set up right. You have your 4 cables that run down here, and then you have your 2 cables that run for these 2 plugs that go onto that one. I'm not sure if this goes here or over here. All the photos showed it over here, but I feel like it'd make more sense over here, but I don't know. Over here, we have our 4 plug wires that go down here. We have our mount for our air filter that mounts right here and mounts onto that. And then we have this for the 2 plug wires, and then that. There wasn't an acorn nut for one of them, so I'm assuming that's the one that doesn't get an acorn nut for some reason. Maybe it collides with the nut for that. That's my best guess, so that's why I put the normal nut right there. But all of those are powder-coated black, and the valve covers are powder-coated chrome. That is looking absolutely fantastic. Now, I also got oil pan gaskets for this, as I was originally thinking the oil pan was leaking, but it was actually oil coming out from the here, just dripping all the way down and settling around the rim. So I might not do that, but I have it out. I probably should. Now we're going to go ahead and slap in some new spark plugs. These are the ones that came with the car, and they technically worked-ish, but we're just going to go ahead and replace them with new. That's why I left them in and just let them get painted, because I knew I was going to be replacing them. And there we go. We got plugs and wires on this thing. That is looking absolutely fantastic. Now we're going to go ahead and try and pull off this steering thing here, because whenever you turn the wheel, this thing moves front and back instead of just rotating. So we're going to pull it out, and we can replace the gasket, I guess the bearings on the inside. I got a kit to do it, so hopefully that will go without too much issue, assuming we can get these things off of it. Yeah, I believe those needle bearings are probably past their prime. There we go. Once we add a little bit of grease to those, hopefully they'll work a little bit better. I ended up getting the correct number of shims in. It ended up being 3 shims. It did have 2, and 1 extra one shimmed it up nice. 2 was not enough. But it is nicely shimmed up, and it is hopefully nice and no longer loose. I did actually check and wiggle the steering wheel back and forth, and it's no longer clearly moving back and forth, so we should be good to go. Unfortunately, the Studebaker got kicked out to put a transmission in this whale, so now we gotta work on Studebaker things over here. Went ahead and knocked off all the surface rust off our starter and all the grease and stuff, and now I'm going ahead and painting it. I stuffed some towels in the vents there so they don't get any paint in there. I gotta go figure out where the band went that goes over those, get that painted up as well, but I figure I'll paint it with the high temp black for now. We might end up putting the same color as the engine, but I feel like maybe a little bit of a different color might go well with that engine. So let's get this painted up the rest of the way. I gotta flip it over and then let it dry the rest of the way. Unfortunately, this air cleaner, I expected once I took the filter out it'd just be a giant hollow tube and I could get in there and punch that dent out, but that's not the case. There's a inner tube that runs down the center and is the front half here, and then the second half is the outer half. And there's no real way to get in there besides for 2 very tiny holes, and I'm never going to get something in there to actually pop those dents out. There's a dent there, and there's a dent back there. So what I'm going to have to do is get a weld-on stud dent puller tool, the thing that shoots a stud on, and then you can put a slide hammer and pull the stud out. That's what we're going to have to do to pull those dents out. It doesn't need to be perfect, but it needs to not have that giant dent on it. Then we'll get this sandblasted down and powder coated. Now I still need to do the stuff to that transmission there, replace the gaskets that need replaced and get that painted up, but I've done enough with transmissions this weekend, pulling this junkyard transmission for that giant whale. But I guess that'll have to wait till next time. Every time I mention this transmission, everyone's saying you gotta replace every single gasket on it, and I really don't want to do that because that's going to be multiple hundreds of dollars to do. So again, I'm just going to replace the ones that are leaking currently. It works, it shifts into every gear that I've tested so far. I mean, it goes in reverse and it goes into drive. If we run into issues later, I'll drop it out. You know what's easier than dropping out a stupid heavy Suburban transmission? Dropping out a pretty light, relatively, like a 3-speed Studebaker transmission. That's a lot easier to drop out than this bastard. So, if that happens to have issues, we'll drop that out and we'll rebuild it and we'll spend the money, but I'm not going to waste $500 rebuilding that transmission for no reason. If I could even do it for $500. Let's do this in, like, terms of arcade machines. This Miss Pac-Man, you could fully restore this and make it look brand new, but there's no real reason to do that. There's thousands of these things out there, and if you want one that looks brand new, you can buy a reproduction that looks the exact same as it would have when it rolled off the assembly line. So there's really no point of doing that, you might as well keep it all original. But then there's cabinets like this that were left in a barn to rot for many years, and this is the last known to exist 1951 H.C. Evans pushover, so I went and took the time to perfectly restore it, for the most part, to the best of my ability, because it's the only one of these out there that is known currently. So you gotta draw the line somewhere in the middle of that, between where your thing really needs restored or not, if it needs perfectly restored or if it just needs to be usable. This Bobby Orr Power Play pinball machine, the entire top half is brand new because this was left outside and that was full of black molds. That entire top half has been replaced and is perfectly restored. However, down here you can see I left that original, because, well, that is original to the cabinet. There's no point of cutting a new board and re-stenciling that when I can have it original. There's no need to just go ahead and parts cannon the entire thing and replace everything. Plus, I grew up watching Roadkill, Junkyard Digs, and more recently Pole Barn Garage, so, well, that probably explains a few things. And here's the poor ejected Studebaker. But if you like what you saw, please leave a like and subscribe. I'll see you next time. Hopefully we'll get this motor in here soon.